The letter arrived on a Tuesday, smudged and worn from its journey across 2 states, and Willow Anderson knew before opening it that her world was about to collapse. Her fingers trembled as she broke the unfamiliar wax seal, not the careful script of her betrothed, but something official and cold. Nebraska Territory, 1867, Miss Anderson. The letter began in formal script. It is with deep regret we inform you of the passing of James Holloway. Willow sank to the porch steps of her father's homestead. The letter clutched to her chest as the spring wind caught her honey blonde hair. James was gone. Her fiancé, the man who had promised to send for her once he established their new life in Colorado, would never write again. Pneumonia took him quickly. The letter continued dispassionately. His final affairs have been settled according to territorial law. 6 months of waiting for his letters. 6 months of planning a future that would never come. 6 months of telling her father to be patient, that James would fulfill his promise. And now nothing. Her father found her there an hour later, dried tears streaking her face. "What's happened, child?" Thomas Anderson asked, his weathered hands resting on his daughter's shoulders. "James is dead," she said simply. "The letters stopped because he's gone." The older man sighed, removing his hat. "I'm sorry, Willow, truly. But perhaps this is God's way of telling you that your place is here." Willow stood, brushing dust from her skirt. "My place was with him. We had plans." "Plans change," her father said, not unkindly. "You're 22 now. Solomon Baker has asked twice about courting you. He's a good man with a fine farm." "I don't want Solomon Baker," Willow replied, her voice gaining strength with her resolve. "I don't want any of this." That evening, as the lamp burned low in her small bedroom, Willow made her decision. James had written of Silver Creek, Colorado, a mining town with promise, he'd said. He'd purchased land there, sent money for supplies. Someone would know what had become of his property. Perhaps she could still have some part of the dream they'd shared. For days later, she stood on the platform at the Nebraska City Station, her father's disapproving figure growing smaller as the train pulled away. One carpetbag, $200 saved from teaching at the local school, and her mother's gold locket were all she carried toward an uncertain future. The journey west was arduous. 3 train connections, then a 2-day stagecoach ride that left her body aching and her spirit nearly broken. When the driver finally called out, "Silver Creek," Willow peered through the dust-streaked window at a town that seemed both smaller and rougher than James had described. A single dusty street lined with false-fronted buildings. The sound of a piano drifting from the saloon. Men in worn clothing moving with purpose between establishments. This was not the thriving community James had painted in his letters. "First time in Silver Creek, miss?" asked the station agent as Willow claimed her bag. "Yes, I'm looking for information about a man named James Holloway. He owned property here." The agent's expression shifted. "Holloway? Heard he passed some months back. Never met him myself. Town marshal might know more." Willow thanked him and made her way to the Silver Creek Hotel, a 2-story structure that had seen better days. The proprietress, a stout woman named Mrs. Gunderson, looked Willow up and down with suspicious eyes. "Traveling alone, are you?" "Yes," Willow replied, summoning her courage. "I've come to settle my late fiancé's affairs." Mrs. Gunderson's expression softened slightly. "Sorry for your loss, miss. Rooms are $1 a night. Includes breakfast." "Thank you. I'll need accommodations for at least a week." That night, in a narrow bed with a lumpy mattress, Willow questioned her decision. The town was nothing like James had described. Had he lied to make her more eager to join him? Or had his dreams simply been larger than reality? Morning brought no answers but did bring resolve. After a breakfast of hard biscuits and thin coffee, Willow made her way to the marshal's office. Marshal Jenkins was a graying man with kind eyes that contrasted with his stern bearing. He listened as Willow explained her situation. "James Holloway," he said thoughtfully. "Yes, I remember the case. Came down with pneumonia after getting caught in a spring storm. Doctor did what he could, but—" He trailed off, then continued. "He did own a plot of land just outside town. 10 acres with a small cabin he was building. Not much to it yet." "What's become of it?" Willow asked. "County's been holding it. No known family came forward." "You say you were engaged?" "Yes, but we never had the chance to marry. I have his letters, though." The marshal nodded thoughtfully. "That might help your claim, but you'll need to petition the county judge. He only comes through every 6 weeks. Next visit is—" He checked a calendar on his wall. 3 weeks from now. 3 weeks. Longer than she'd planned to stay, and her funds were limited. "What about the cabin? Could I at least see it?" "It's about 2 miles north of town. Nobody would stop you from looking, I suppose. But it's not in good shape, miss. Been sitting empty since winter." That afternoon, Willow hired a wagon and driver to take her to James's property. The land was pretty enough, a gentle slope with cottonwood trees along one edge and a small creek cutting through the western corner. But the cabin was little more than a shell, 4 walls, half a roof, and dirt floor. Standing in what would have been their home, Willow felt the first real pang of loss. Not just for James, but for the future they'd planned. Children running across this land. Meals shared in this space. Dreams that would never materialize. The driver, an older man named Henry, watched her from the wagon. "Not much to look at now," he called. "But land's good. Water's reliable year-round, they say." Willow nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. On the ride back to town, she asked Henry about work opportunities in Silver Creek. "For a woman?" He scratched his beard. "Hotel might need help. There's talk of starting a proper school come fall. Until then, maybe Mrs. Wallace at the general store. Her arthritis has been acting up something fierce." The next morning, Willow secured a position at Wallace Mercantile, organizing inventory and helping customers. The pay was meager but would extend her stay until the judge arrived. Each evening, she returned to her hotel room and wrote in her journal, planning what she might do with James's land if her claim was recognized. A week passed this way, with Willow settling into the rhythms of Silver Creek. She learned the townspeople's names and stories. She discovered that James hadn't been well known in town. He'd spent most of his time working on his homestead, coming to town only for supplies. On Sunday, Willow attended services at the small church and afterward was invited to dinner by the Petersons, a kindly family who had known James slightly. "He seemed a decent sort," Mr. Peterson offered as they shared a simple meal. "Kept to himself mostly. Ambitious plans for that land of his." "He wrote me about those plans," Willow said, her voice steady despite the ache in her heart. "A proper house eventually. Orchards along the western edge." Mrs. Peterson patted Willow's hand. "It's still good land, dear. If the judge recognizes your claim, you could sell it for a tidy sum. Enough to get you back home or settled somewhere more suitable for a young lady." But as the days passed, Willow found herself less certain about selling. This land represented the last connection to James, to their shared dream. Could she really part with it so easily? On her 10th day in Silver Creek, everything changed. Willow was arranging a display of yard goods when the bell above the door jingled. She looked up to see a tall man in trail-worn clothes step inside, the sunlight at his back casting his features in shadow. "Be right with you," Mrs. Wallace called from behind the counter. The man stepped further into the store, revealing a face that made Willow catch her breath. Handsome wasn't quite the word, his features were too rugged for that. but there was something compelling in his blue eyes and the way he carried himself. "No rush," he replied, his voice deep with a hint of a southern drawl. He nodded politely to Willow before moving toward the shelf of canned goods. Mrs. Wallace bustled over to him. "Mr. Thornton, wasn't expecting you in town for another week. How's that fence line coming along?" "Slow but steady," he answered. "Needed more nails and thought I'd pick up mail while I was here." "Well, you're in luck. Package came for you yesterday." As Mrs. Wallace retrieved the package from behind the counter, the man Mr. Thornton glanced again at Willow, this time with curiosity. "Don't believe I've had the pleasure," he said, tipping his hat slightly. Before Willow could respond, Mrs. Wallace interjected, "This is Miss Anderson. She's helping out while I rest this confounded hand. Miss Anderson, this is Wade Thornton. Owns the Flying T Ranch north of town." "Madam," he acknowledged with a slight bow of his head. "You're new to Silver Creek?" "Yes," Willow replied. "I arrived just over a week ago." Something in her voice must have revealed her Eastern origins because his eyebrow raised slightly. "Long way from home, I'd wager." "Nebraska," she confirmed, "though I'm hoping to stay in Colorado." Interest flickered in his eyes. "That's so? Not many unmarried ladies choose Silver Creek for resettlement." The observation bordered on impertinent, but his tone held no judgment, only curiosity. Mrs. Wallace, never one to miss an opportunity for gossip, supplied. "Miss Anderson was engaged to poor James Holloway. She's come to claim his property." Wade Thornton's expression shifted, something unreadable crossing his features. "Holloway's place? The one up by Lightning Creek. You knew him?" Willow asked eagerly. "Not well," Wade answered. "Our properties share a boundary line to the north. Helped him raise part of that cabin last fall." He paused. "Sorry about your loss, madam." "Thank you," Willow said automatically, then added, "You say your ranch borders his land?" "About half a mile of shared property line, yes." Mrs. Wallace handed him his package. "Mr. Thornton's been helping look after that place since James passed. Keeps an eye out for trespassers, doesn't he?" Wade shrugged, suddenly looking uncomfortable. Seemed the neighborly thing to do. Willow felt a surge of gratitude. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Thornton. Call me Wade," he said. "And it's nothing, really. That land's got potential. Be ashamed to see it go to waste." After paying for his supplies, Wade tipped his hat again. "Miss Anderson, if you need anything regarding that property, I'm usually around. Flying T's the next ranch north." After he left, Mrs. Wallace chuckled. "Well now, that's the most words I've heard from Wade Thornton in one sitting since he came to Silver Creek 3 years ago." The next few days passed without incident, but Willow found her thoughts returning to the taciturn rancher. There was something intriguing about him, a depth beneath his reserved exterior that piqued her curiosity. 13 days after her arrival in Silver Creek, Willow decided to visit James's property again. This time, she walked the 2 miles, wanting time alone with her thoughts. The late spring air was crisp, the wildflowers beginning to dot the landscape with color. The cabin looked the same, unfinished and abandoned. But this time, Willow walked the perimeter of the property, trying to envision what it could become. She was standing by the creek, lost in thought, when the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her turn. Wade Thornton rode toward her on a handsome bay gelding. He reined the horse to a stop a respectful distance away. "Miss Anderson," he called. "Thought that might be you." "Mr. Thornton," she acknowledged. "I hope I'm not trespassing." He dismounted with the easy grace of a man who'd spent his life in the saddle. "Not at all. As far as I'm concerned, this is your land. The judge might disagree in 2 weeks' time." Wade led his horse closer. "From what I hear, you've got a solid claim." Letters from the deceased. Proof of your engagement. You've been asking about me? Willow observed, not sure whether to be flattered or concerned. Small town, he replied with a slight shrug. People talk, and I make it my business to know what's happening around my property. Willow nodded, accepting the explanation. I've been told you helped James with the cabin. Some. He had big plans but not much experience in building. Wade gestured toward the structure. Roof's the problem. Design's too complex for a first-time builder. Told him to start simpler, but he was determined to create something impressive. For me, Willow said softly. He wanted it to be perfect when I arrived. Wade's expression softened. He spoke of you. Not much. He wasn't one for personal conversation, but enough to know you were important to him. The simple statement touched Willow deeply. Thank you for telling me that. They stood in companionable silence for a moment. Then Wade said, if you're planning to stay, that cabin needs work before winter. Colorado nights get cold. I haven't decided yet, Willow admitted. Part of me wants to honor James by seeing his dream through. Another part wonders if I'm being foolish. Nothing foolish about wanting to build something of your own, Wade said. His blue eyes met hers directly. But it won't be easy, especially for a woman alone. There was no condescension in his tone, just honest assessment. I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Thornton. A slight smile tugged at his lips. I don't doubt that, Miss Anderson. He glanced at the sun's position. It's getting late. May I escort you back to town? Willow hesitated only briefly before accepting. They walked side by side, Wade leading his horse, the conversation flowing more easily than she expected. He told her about his ranch, modest but growing, and asked thoughtful questions about her life in Nebraska. As they neared town, Wade asked, Have you visited your land often since arriving? Just twice, Willow replied. Why do you ask? There's been word of cattle rustlers operating in the area. Nothing serious yet, but best to be cautious. If you're planning another visit, perhaps let me know? I could accompany you if my work allows. The offer seemed genuine, with no ulterior motive Willow could detect. That's very kind, Mr. Thornton. Wade, he reminded her. And it's no trouble. Like I said, neighbors. At the edge of town, they parted ways, but not before Wade mentioned that he'd be delivering cattle to the Silver Creek stockyard in 3 days' time. If you have questions about the property, I'll be around, he added. That night, Willow wrote in her journal about the encounter, noting the rancher's kindness and knowledge. If she did decide to keep James's land, having a knowledgeable neighbor would be invaluable. The next morning brought an unexpected complication. Mrs. Gunderson informed Willow that a large group of railroad investors would be arriving the following week, and all hotel rooms had been booked in advance. I'm sorry, dear, but you'll need to find other accommodations after Sunday. Panic flickered through Willow. She knew few people in town well enough to impose upon them for lodging, and the judge wouldn't arrive for at least 10 more days. Mrs. Wallace suggested the boarding house run by Widow Simmons, but upon inquiry, Willow discovered it was also fully booked. By closing time, she still had no solution to her impending homelessness. You could stay at the cabin, Mrs. Wallace suggested hesitantly. It's not much, but it has walls at least. Half a roof and no proper floor, Willow reminded her. And it's 2 miles from town. True, Mrs. Wallace conceded, though I suppose in desperate times. The bell above the door jingled, and Wade Thornton stepped inside, looking dustier than on his previous visit but otherwise the same. Mr. Thornton, Mrs. Wallace greeted him. Twice in 1 week we're honored. He nodded politely, just passing through. Forgot coffee last time. As Mrs. Wallace fetched the item, Wade glanced at Willow. Miss Anderson, he greeted, then frowned slightly. Everything all right? Before Willow could answer, Mrs. Wallace returned with the coffee and launched into an explanation of Willow's housing predicament. Wade listened thoughtfully, then said, "My foreman's wife might be able to help. Sarah's a good woman, and they have a spare room in their cabin on my property. It's further from town than Holloway's place, but it's comfortable." The offer caught Willow by surprise. "That's very generous, but I couldn't impose." "Not an imposition," Wade insisted. "Sarah would welcome the company, truth be told. Not many women out our way." Mrs. Wallace nodded enthusiastically. "That's perfect. The Millers are good Christian folk, Willow. You'd be quite proper there." After further discussion, Willow reluctantly agreed to meet with Sarah Miller the following day. Wade promised to bring her to town when he delivered his cattle. True to his word, Wade appeared at the mercantile shortly after noon the next day, accompanied by a cheerful woman in her 30s. "Miss Anderson," he said, "this is Sarah Miller." Sarah stepped forward with a warm smile and extended her hand. "So pleased to meet you, Miss Anderson. Wade's told us about your situation. We'd be delighted to have you stay with us until the judge arrives." Something in the woman's genuine warmth put Willow instantly at ease. "You're very kind, Mrs. Miller. Sarah, please, and it's no trouble at all. Our Abigail left for Denver last year to teach, and her room's been empty. Besides, I could use another woman to talk to. These men work from sunup to sundown and barely say 10 words between them at dinner." Wade cleared his throat. "I say plenty when there's something worth saying." Sarah laughed. "See what I mean?" The three made arrangements for Willow to move to the Miller cabin on Sunday afternoon. As they were leaving, Wade paused. "If you'd like to visit Holloway's property before then, I'm free tomorrow morning. Could show you the boundary lines, maybe offer some thoughts on what needs fixing first." Willow accepted the offer, more eager than she cared to admit for another opportunity to speak with the intriguing rancher. The next day dawned clear and warm. Wade arrived at the hotel promptly at 9, riding his bay gelding and leading a gentle-looking mare for Willow. "Hope you ride," he said by way of greeting. "Thought it might be easier than walking." "I do," Willow confirmed, though in truth her experience was limited to occasional rides on her father's plow horse. Wade helped her mount with professional courtesy, then swung easily into his own saddle. They rode at a comfortable pace out of town, the morning sun warming their backs. "Tell me about this land," Willow requested as they traveled. "What made James choose it?" Wade considered the question. "Water rights, primarily. That creek runs year-round, even in drought years. Soil's good too, not too rocky. And the location's convenient, close enough to town but with privacy." "You know the area well." "I should. Been ranching in Colorado Territory since '61. "Through the war years," Willow observed. Something flickered across Wade's features. "Yes." His tone discouraged further questions on that topic, so Willow changed the subject. "What would you do with this land, if it were yours?" The question seemed to surprise him. "Me? Well, it's smaller than what I'd need for cattle. But for a family homestead." He thought for a moment. "I'd finish that cabin properly first. Simpler roof, solid floor. Then maybe plant some crops on the southern slope. Wheat would do well there. Fruit trees along the creek when established. It's good land. Versatile." They reached the property, and Wade took her on a thorough tour, pointing out features she'd missed on previous visits: a natural spring hidden among rocks, the best soil for gardening, the spot where wildlife frequently crossed. At the cabin, he dismounted and helped Willow down, then examined the structure with a critical eye. "It could be salvaged," he said finally. "Would take work, but the foundation's solid. Frame's good too. It's just the roof and finishing that need attention." "Do you think I could do it?" Willow asked impulsively. "Finish it, I mean." Wade looked at her thoughtfully. "Not alone, no. But with help? Yes." His honesty was refreshing after the patronizing attitudes she'd encountered from other men in town. "Would you help me?" The words escaped before she could consider their implications. Wade's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're serious about staying?" "I think I might be," Willow admitted, surprising herself with the realization. This was supposed to be my home. Our home. Perhaps it still could be, just differently than planned. Wade was quiet for a moment, studying her with those penetrating blue eyes. "If that's your decision, then yes, I'd help. As would others in the community, I expect. Folks here understand the importance of neighbors." They spent another hour examining the cabin and discussing improvements. Wade's knowledge of building was extensive, his suggestions practical. By the time they mounted up to return to town, Willow felt more confident about the possibility of staying. As they rode, Wade asked, "What did you do in Nebraska?" "Before coming here, I was a teacher," Willow replied. "Small schoolhouse, children aged 6 to 16. Silver Creek could use a teacher," Wade observed. "Children here either learn from parents or go without. Mrs. Wallace mentioned something similar, said there was talk of starting a school in the fall." Wade nodded. "Town's growing. More families arriving every month." The conversation shifted to the community, with Wade providing insights about various residents who could be trusted, who drove hard bargains, who might be willing to help a newcomer. As they approached town, Willow found herself reluctant for their time together to end. Wade Thornton was unlike any man she'd known, direct but not harsh, knowledgeable without being boastful, helpful without being overbearing. "Thank you for today," she said as they reached the hotel. "It was informative." A slight smile curved his lips. "High praise indeed." His hands were gentle as he helped her dismount, lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary. Their eyes met briefly, and Willow felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. "I'll see you Sunday," Wade said, his voice slightly rougher than before. "When you move to the Millers." "Yes," Willow agreed. "Sunday." As she watched him ride away, Willow acknowledged a truth she'd been avoiding. She was becoming interested in Wade Thornton in ways that had nothing to do with neighborly assistance. Sunday arrived with Willow both nervous and excited about her change in living arrangements. She'd spent the previous day saying temporary goodbyes to her new acquaintances in town and preparing for a more rural existence. Wade arrived promptly after church services, driving a wagon rather than riding. He helped load her trunk and carpet bag, then offered his hand to assist her onto the seat beside him. "Ready?" he asked, his expression unreadable. "As I'll ever be," Willow replied honestly. The journey to the Flying T Ranch took nearly an hour, giving Willow time to appreciate the changing landscape. As they traveled north, the terrain became more varied, rolling hills giving way to scattered pine forests, with the distant mountains forming a majestic backdrop. "It's beautiful," she breathed, taking in the view. "One of the reasons I chose this land," Wade admitted. "Never tire of that sight." The ranch itself was impressive, not ostentatious but well-established, with a main house, barn, bunkhouse, and several outbuildings arranged in a practical layout. Beyond the immediate structures, cattle grazed on expansive pastures. "How much land do you have?" Willow asked, unable to hide her amazement. "Just over 2,000 acres, Wade replied. "Small by Texas standards, but enough for my purposes." He directed the wagon past the main house toward a smaller cabin set a short distance away. "Miller's place," he explained. "Tom oversees the ranch operations when I'm away." Sarah Miller emerged from the cabin as they approached, wiping her hands on her apron and smiling broadly. Behind her stood a tall, lean man with a weathered face who Willow assumed was Tom. After introductions and greetings, Wade helped unload Willow's belongings, while Sarah showed her to a small but comfortable bedroom. "It's not fancy," Sarah apologized, "but it's clean and private." "It's perfect," Willow assured her. "I'm grateful for your hospitality." Over a simple but delicious dinner of venison stew and fresh bread, Willow learned more about the Millers. They'd come west from Missouri after the war, seeking a fresh start after losing their farm. Wade had hired Tom based on a recommendation from a mutual acquaintance, and they'd been with the Flying T for nearly 2 years. "Best decision I ever made," Wade commented. "Except maybe coming to Colorado in the first place." "Where were you before?" Willow asked, curious about his history. A brief shadow crossed his features. "Texas originally, then various places during the war." Tom and Sarah exchanged glances but said nothing, suggesting this was a topic not often discussed. Sensing his reluctance, Willow changed the subject. "Sarah, Wade tells me you keep a garden. I'd love to learn more about what grows well here." The conversation flowed more easily after that, with plans made for Willow to help Sarah with various household tasks in exchange for her room and board. Wade excused himself early, citing ranch business, but not before arranging to take Willow to her property again later that week. "We could start assessing what materials you'd need to finish that cabin," he suggested. "If you're still considering it." "I am," Willow confirmed. "Very much so." In the days that followed, Willow settled into life at the Flying T. Sarah proved to be a delightful companion, practical, kind, and full of useful knowledge about frontier living. Tom was quieter but unfailingly polite, often bringing small gifts from his hunting excursions for his wife to prepare. Wade himself was a more elusive presence. He worked from dawn until dusk, often eating quickly before returning to some task or riding out to check on distant parts of his property. Yet Willow noticed that he made time each evening to inquire about her day and answer any questions she had about the area. On Thursday, true to his word, Wade took Willow to James's property. This time, they brought tools for a more thorough inspection of the cabin. "Foundation solid," Wade confirmed after crawling underneath to check. "Holloway did good work there." They spent hours examining every aspect of the structure, with Wade explaining what needed to be fixed and how. Willow took notes, increasingly determined to make this place her home. "It would take time," Wade cautioned as they prepared to leave. "And money. Do you have funds for materials?" "Some," Willow admitted. "Not enough for everything, but perhaps enough to start. And if I can secure a teaching position." Wade nodded thoughtfully. "I know some men who could help with labor. Ranchers often trade work during slow seasons." "I couldn't ask." "You wouldn't be asking," Wade interrupted gently. "I would, as a neighbor." He paused, then added, "These hills can be unforgiving to those who go it alone. Community matters here." On the ride back to the ranch, Wade surprised her by saying, "Judge Harmon arrives Tuesday. I could accompany you to town if you'd like. Might help to have someone vouch for your intentions with the property." Willow glanced at him, touched by the offer. "You would do that?" "Of course," he replied simply. Over the next few days, Willow found herself watching Wade more closely, the way he spoke respectfully to every ranch hand, how he took time to listen to Tom's concerns, his gentleness with the horses. He was a man who commanded respect not through force but through quiet competence and fairness. Sunday evening found them sitting on the miller's porch after dinner, enjoying the cool air. Tom and Sarah had retired early, leaving Willow and Wade alone with their thoughts and the vast starry sky. "I never saw stars like this in Nebraska," Willow commented, breaking the comfortable silence. "They seem closer here." "It's the clear air," Wade replied. "And the height. We're nearly 7,000 feet above sea level." Another silence fell, this one charged with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Wade said, "May I ask you something personal, Miss Anderson?" Willow, she corrected gently. And yes, you may. Your fiancé, Holloway. Did you love him deeply? The question startled her with its directness. She began, then paused to consider her answer honestly. I believed I did. We'd known each other since childhood. Marriage seemed the natural progression. She looked down at her hands. But I think perhaps I was more in love with the idea of our future than with James himself. The admission felt both disloyal and freeing. Why do you ask? She ventured. Wade's gaze remained on the distant mountains. Been wondering what brought a woman like you all this way for a man who's gone. Whether it was duty or love. Perhaps a bit of both, Willow acknowledged. But now I'm here for myself. For what I might build. Wade nodded slowly. Good reason. Tuesday morning dawned clear and cool. Wade had business in town anyway, so they rode together, arriving at the courthouse just as Judge Harmon was settling in. The proceedings were less formal than Willow had feared. She presented James's letters, explained their engagement, and answered the judge's questions about her intentions for the property. And you plan to stay in Colorado Territory, Miss Anderson? Judge Harmon asked, peering at her over wire-rimmed spectacles. I do, Your Honor. I hope to establish a home and possibly teach in the community. The judge turned his attention to Wade. Mr. Thornton, I understand your neighboring land to the claim in question? Yes, sir. The Flying T shares a northern boundary with Holloway's parcel. And your opinion on Miss Anderson's claim? Wade's voice was steady. I believe Miss Anderson has legitimate right to the property. Holloway spoke of her as his intended. His letters confirmed their arrangement. And she's demonstrated serious intent to develop the land as Holloway planned. Judge Harmon considered this, then nodded. In the absence of blood relatives coming forward, and given the evidence presented, I'm inclined to recognize Miss Anderson's claim based on her betrothal to the deceased. He stamped several papers and handed them to the clerk. Property deed will be transferred upon payment of a $5 filing fee. Welcome to Colorado Territory, Miss Anderson. Relief flooded through Willow. The land was hers legally and officially. Outside the courthouse, she turned to Wade with shining eyes. Thank you, she said. Your support made a difference. Spoke only truth, he replied with a slight shrug. Congratulations, landowner. They celebrated with lunch at the hotel restaurant, the nicest establishment in Silver Creek, where Wade surprised her by proposing a toast. To new beginnings, he said, raising his coffee cup. To new beginnings, Willow echoed, wondering if he meant more than just her property. Before returning to the ranch, they stopped at Wallace Mercantile, where Willow approached Mrs. Wallace about teaching opportunities in town. Perfect timing, the older woman exclaimed. Town council just voted last week to establish a proper school. They've been looking for someone with experience. By the end of their visit to town, Willow had not only secured her land claim but had also been provisionally appointed as Silver Creek schoolteacher, pending formal approval at the next town meeting. The school wouldn't open until September, giving her nearly 3 months to establish her home. The ride back to the Flying T was filled with excited planning, with Wade offering practical suggestions about prioritizing her building needs. Roof first, he insisted. Everything else can wait, but you need proper shelter before the summer storms hit. And how am I supposed to fix a roof by myself? Willow challenged, though her tone was light. Wade's expression grew serious. You won't be by yourself. He paused, then continued more hesitantly. I was thinking, there's a barn raising planned for the Johnsons next weekend. Everyone from surrounding properties will be there. Might be a good opportunity to ask for help with your cabin the following week. Do you think people would agree? Willow asked uncertainly. They hardly know me. They know you're Holloway's intended who's come to honor his memory by building what he started, Wade pointed out. And they know you'll be teaching their children. That carries weight in a community like ours. The word ours sent an unexpected warmth through Willow's chest. True to Wade's prediction, the community response at the Johnson barn raising was overwhelmingly positive. When Wade introduced Willow and briefly explained her situation, offers of help came immediately. "We could do it weekend after next," suggested Frank Peterson, a farmer from east of town. "Between planting and first haying. I've got lumber to spare," offered another man. "Not fancy, but solid." By the end of the day, a cabin raising had been organized, with various community members pledging materials, tools, and labor. The 2 weeks until the cabin raising passed in a flurry of preparation. Wade helped Willow clear the overgrown area around the cabin and salvage what materials could be reused. Sarah taught her to cook for large groups, anticipating the meals they'd need to provide for the workers. During these days of shared labor, something shifted between Willow and Wade. Their conversations deepened, ranging from practical matters to personal philosophies. Willow learned that Wade had fought for the Confederacy reluctantly. He emphasized and had come west afterward seeking redemption and purpose. Wade discovered Willow's passion for education and her quiet determination to create a meaningful life on her own terms. The morning of the cabin raising dawned bright and clear. Willow had spent the night at Sarah's, too excited and nervous to sleep much. They arrived at the property early to find Wade already there, setting up work areas and organizing tools. By mid-morning, wagons began arriving, families from surrounding farms and ranches, men from town. Even Mrs. Wallace closed her store to attend. Everyone brought something: food, tools, or simply willing hands. The day unfolded like a well-choreographed dance. Men removed the faulty roof while women organized the cooking area. Children carried water and lighter materials. Wade moved through it all with quiet authority, directing efforts where needed most. By sunset, the transformation was remarkable. The cabin had a new, simpler roof with proper pitch for snow runoff. The walls had been reinforced and chinked to keep out drafts. A wooden floor had been laid, and a proper stone chimney was half completed. As darkness fell, lanterns were lit, and the workers gathered for a final meal before departing. Frank Peterson raised his cup in a toast. "To Miss Anderson and her new home. May it shelter you through many Colorado winters." "Hear, hear," the group responded. Later, as the last wagon pulled away, Willow stood beside Wade, looking at her transformed cabin in the moonlight. "I can't believe how much they accomplished in one day," she marveled. "That's the way of it out here," Wade replied. "What would take one person months can be done by many in hours." He turned to look at her. "You made an impression on them. They respect what you're doing." "I couldn't have done any of this without you," Willow said softly. Something flickered in Wade's eyes. "You would have found a way. You're stronger than you realize, Willow Anderson." The use of her first name sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the evening chill. "When will you move in?" Wade asked, his voice rougher than usual. "Soon. The chimney needs finishing, and there's still furnishing to consider, but soon." Wade nodded, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "I should get you back to the Millers. It's late." The ride was quiet, both lost in their thoughts. At the Miller cabin, Wade helped Willow down from her horse, his hands lingering at her waist. "Willow," he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with his words. "Yes," she prompted gently. "I find myself." He paused again, then continued with evident difficulty. "I find myself thinking about you, more than is probably proper, given the circumstances." Willow's heart quickened. What circumstances would those be? "You came here for another man, to claim his land, honor his memory." "I did," Willow acknowledged. "But as you once said, plans change." Wade's eyes searched hers. Do they? They already have, she whispered. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the air between them charged with possibility. Then, with obvious reluctance, Wade stepped back. "Good night, Willow," he said quietly. "Good night, Wade." In the weeks that followed, Willow divided her time between preparing her cabin for habitation and helping Sarah with household tasks. Wade continued to assist with the cabin whenever his ranch duties allowed, bringing materials from town and completing the chimney with Tom's help. Their relationship existed in a curious limbo, more than friendship, less than courtship. Wade's initial confession had opened something between them, yet both seemed hesitant to define it further. July arrived with sweltering heat and afternoon thunderstorms. The cabin was finally ready for occupation, with basic furnishings acquired through trading with townspeople: a bed frame from the hotel's storage, a table and chairs from Mrs. Wallace, cookware from Sarah. On the day Willow planned to move in, Wade arrived with an unexpected gift: a rocking chair, handcrafted from pine, with intricate carvings along the arms. "Made it myself," he said gruffly when Willow expressed her amazement. "Thought you might like something comfortable for reading in the evenings." "It's beautiful," she said, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "I don't know what to say." "Thank you, works fine," Wade replied, a rare smile lightening his features. Later, after helping move her belongings into the cabin, Wade stood awkwardly in the doorway. "Well," he said, "guess you're properly settled now." "Thanks to you," Willow acknowledged. "I'll still be checking that fence line regularly," he added hastily, "so I'll be passing by every few days, in case you need anything." The thought of not seeing him daily created an unexpected ache in Willow's chest. "I'd like that," he nodded, seeming relieved. "Good. That's good." That evening, alone in her cabin for the first time, Willow sat in her new rocking chair and wrote in her journal. The entries that had once been filled with grief and uncertainty now spoke of hope and possibility, of a community that had embraced her, of land that was becoming home, and of a man whose quiet strength and integrity had begun to heal parts of her heart she hadn't realized were wounded. August brought preparations for the school year. The town had designated a small building near the church for educational purposes, and Willow spent hours cleaning, organizing, and developing lessons appropriate for the varied ages of her future students. Wade continued to stop by every few days, always with some practical reason: bringing firewood, checking her water supply, repairing a loose shutter. Yet their conversations inevitably extended beyond these tasks, growing deeper and more personal with each visit. One evening, as they sat on her small porch watching a spectacular sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson, Wade finally broached the subject they'd been circling for weeks. "Willow," he began, his voice low and serious, "I need to say something, and I'd appreciate if you'd hear me out before responding." Her heart quickened, but she nodded for him to continue. "When you first came to Silver Creek, I saw you as Holloway's intended someone to help because it was the right thing to do." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But these past months, working alongside you, watching you build a life here through sheer determination, my feelings have changed." Wade turned to face her fully, his blue eyes intent on hers. "I care for you, Willow, more than I've cared for anyone in a very long time, and I believe hope that you might feel something similar for me." Willow's breath caught in her throat. "I do," she whispered. Relief washed over his features. "Then I'd like to court you properly if you're willing. No rush, no pressure. Just the chance to see where this might lead." Joy bubbled up inside Willow, unexpected and bright. "I'd like that very much, Wade Thornton." His smile, rare and beautiful, transformed his face. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, Wade leaned forward and placed a gentle kiss on her cheek. "Thank you," he murmured. The formal courtship began with small gestures: flowers left on her porch, assistance with tasks around her property, occasional meals shared in town after church services. The community watched with approving eyes, many commenting that they'd seen this coming from the start. As September approached and school preparations intensified, Wade surprised Willow by organizing improvements to the schoolhouse: new shelves for books, repaired desks, a proper blackboard mounted on the wall. Children learn better in pleasant surroundings, he explained when she expressed her gratitude. The school's opening day arrived with 12 students ranging in age from 6 to 15. Willow found herself thriving in the role she trained for, adapting her Eastern teaching methods to the practical needs of frontier children. Each evening, she returned to her cabin, her home, with a sense of accomplishment and belonging that grew stronger by the day. This land, which she'd claimed initially to honor James's memory, had become truly hers in ways she hadn't anticipated. Wade's courtship continued through the fall, each shared moment deepening their connection. He spoke more freely of his past, the ranch in Texas he'd left behind, his complicated feelings about the war, his journey west seeking redemption. "I wasn't proud of the side I fought for," he admitted one evening as they sat by her fire. "But leaving felt like abandoning my home, my responsibilities. Took me years to reconcile those feelings." "And have you," Willow asked gently, "reconciled them?" Wade's eyes met hers. "Getting there. Having something new to build toward helps." As winter approached, practical concerns arose about Willow's isolated cabin. The first snow fell in October, light and melting by noon, but a harbinger of harsher weather to come. "Winter travel between your place and town will be difficult," Wade pointed out, "even dangerous during storms." "I've considered that," Willow admitted. "Mrs. Wallace offered me a room above the store for the school term, but..." She hesitated. "This is my home now. I'm reluctant to abandon it, even temporarily." Wade was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, "There's another solution, though it might seem premature." Willow's pulse quickened. "What solution?" "Marriage," he said simply. The word hung between them, momentous and charged with possibility. "Wade," Willow began, but he raised a hand to gently interrupt. "Hear me out. I care for you deeply, Willow. I believe you feel the same for me." I had planned to wait longer before speaking of marriage, but practical concerns accelerate the timeline. His eyes held hers steadily. "This isn't a proposal born of convenience. It's what I want, what I've been moving toward these past months. But I understand if you need more time." Willow's mind raced. Was it too soon? They'd known each other only 6 months. Yet in that time, they'd worked side by side, shared hopes and fears, built a foundation of mutual respect and growing affection. "I don't need more time," she said finally. "Not to know my heart." She took a deep breath. "But I do have one concern." "Name it," Wade said. "My land. This cabin. If we marry, legally everything becomes yours. I don't want to lose what I've built here." Understanding dawned in Wade's eyes. "You wouldn't be giving up anything. We could maintain both properties, use the cabin during school terms for its proximity to town, and the ranch house otherwise." He reached for her hands. "This would be a partnership, Willow, equal in all ways that matter." The sincerity in his voice dissolved her reservations. This was not James's vision for her future. It was better, richer, more equal. "Then yes," she said, squeezing his hands. "I will marry you, Wade Thornton." Joy transformed his features as he drew her into his arms. Their first real kiss was gentle yet filled with promise of passion, partnership, and a future built together. They were married 3 weeks later in the Silver Creek Church, with the entire community in attendance. Sarah stood as Willow's witness, Tom as Wade's. Reverend Barnes spoke of new beginnings and partnerships founded on respect and love. "You may kiss your bride," he concluded with a smile. As Wade's lips met hers, Willow felt the final pieces of her life settling into place. What had begun as a journey to claim a dead man's dream had transformed into something she could never have imagined, a life truly her own, shared with a man who saw her strength rather than her vulnerability. That evening, in the main house of the Flying T Ranch, now her home as much as the cabin, Wade handed Willow a small package wrapped in brown paper. "A wedding gift," he explained. Inside was a leather-bound journal, similar to the one she'd been writing in since arriving in Colorado. "For new chapters," Wade said softly. "Our chapters." Willow opened it to find an inscription on the first page, written in Wade's careful hand. "Her groom never wrote again, but I promise to write you a future, one word, one day, 1 year at a time. With all my heart, Wade." Tears blurred Willow's vision as she looked up at her husband. "It's perfect," she whispered. Later, as they sat before the fire in their home, Willow reflected on the strange, winding path that had led her to this moment. James's death had seemed like an ending, the collapse of all her hopes and plans. Instead, it had been a beginning she couldn't have foreseen. "What are you thinking?" Wade asked, his arm warm around her shoulders. "About letters," Willow replied. "The ones that stopped coming, and the future you promised to write instead." Wade's expression grew thoughtful. "Holloway's letters brought you here. For that, I'll always be grateful to him." "As will I," Willow agreed, "though not for the reasons I expected." Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. Inside, the fire crackled, casting golden light across the room. And between them, something precious continued to grow, a love born not of youthful infatuation or practical arrangement, but of shared labor, mutual respect, and the courage to begin again. 5 years later, Willow stood on the porch of the cabin, watching her 3-year-old daughter, Emma, chasing butterflies in the wildflower meadow that had once been just scrubland. Wade approached from the barn, their infant son James cradled against his chest. "School preparations finished?" he asked, joining her on the porch. "Almost," Willow replied. 27 students this year. We may need to expand again." Wade nodded, pride evident in his expression. "Town council's already discussing it. Silver Creek's growing faster than anyone predicted." The cabin had indeed become their home during school terms, expanded now with additional rooms and modern conveniences. The ranch house remained their winter residence, where Wade managed the increasingly successful Flying T. "Hard to believe it's been 5 years, Willow mused. "Sometimes it feels like I just arrived yesterday. And sometimes it feels like you've always been here," Wade replied, shifting little James to his other arm. "Like you were always meant to be here." Willow smiled, thinking of the path that had brought her to this moment, the grief that had propelled her west, the courage that had kept her here, the love that had transformed everything. "I was," she said simply. "This is exactly where I'm meant to be." Emma ran toward them, golden curls flying, a bouquet of wildflowers clutched in her small hand. "Mama, look what I found." As Willow knelt to admire her daughter's treasures, she caught Wade's gaze, warm, loving, and still sometimes wondering, as if he couldn't quite believe his good fortune. This was the future he had promised to write for her. Not in letters that could be lost or fade, but in moments lived together, in a home built by their own hands, in children who carried forward their shared dreams. It was a future more beautiful than any she could have imagined when she first stepped off that stagecoach in Silver Creek, and it was only beginning.